Previously on the Adventures of Cooper.
Hey Cooper, what can you see?
It looks like some sort of portal.
Don't get too close, we don't know what we're dealing with. Cooper, you're too close.
Guys, it's pulling me in. Guys, I can't stop.
Cooper!
What's up YouTube, and welcome to another episode of the Adventures of Cooper series. This episode is really kickstarting the series, where you'll be able to go into the description down below and download all the previous pages for Cooper's adventure. Each page is a page of the comic book, so as we go through this series you'll get a new page every time a Cooper tutorial pops up, and you can add your very own design in there. So your designs will feature in your version of Cooper's adventure. In the description down below, there's also a link to the brush you're going to need for Cooper himself, and also the palette as well, so you can follow along with the exact same colours. And with all that said, let's get started. So as always, let's create a new canvas. We're going to hit the plus icon, and our canvas size for today is 2500 by 2500. And then to get started, we're going to go to our layers. We're going to change our background colour out to this dark colour here, which I believe is pretty close to black. And now with that set, let's go ahead and add Cooper in, and then we can start to base the whole design around where his position is. So let's go to our brush library, and you should have installed the Cooper brush that's in the description down below. And once we have our brush selected for Cooper, I'm going to lower my brush size down to roughly around about 50%. Tap in the middle of the screen, and we're probably going to adjust that anyway. So taking a look at the proportions, we could probably just scale it down until roughly Cooper's smack bang in the center, which we're going to want to go to snapping and turn on snapping, and just position him roughly that sort of size in the middle there, making sure it's perfectly in the center. Now what we're going to do is we're going to leave Cooper for the minute, and we're going to add in all the rock formation on either side first, then the lighting, and then we'll shade him in at the end, but we'll use him as a guide as to where to add our rocks. So then we're going to go to our layers. We're going to create a new layer. We're actually going to create two and then group them together. So we're going to swipe on the bottom one out the two and hit group, and this will be our foreground here in front of us, and then we can make our way backwards through the design. So in this group, we're going to go ahead and select the bottom layer out the two. Let's go to our brush library, and let's change it out to the calligraphy option of monoline. And then my brush size is going to be set to, let's go for something around about 20%. It's not too critical as to what your brush size is, but all we're going to do for the moment is with white, we're going to draw in the rocky formations on either side. So you're going to want to create some sort of rocky designs or some sort of rough shapes like this, and by all means go in, create some big jitters within your rocky formation, and you want to go all the way from the bottom all the way to the top and off the canvas, so that we can just drag and drop our colour in like so. And don't go too far inwards, because we need to create some more rocks behind, but we can always adjust it afterwards. And now sticking on that layer, we're going to do the same on the other side. So take a look at where your proportion, you also want to make sure that your design doesn't sort of reflect completely. So maybe we start somewhat here and then create some sort of formation that's coming down, and then go a little bit further in and just create that rocky sort of look, and just really just shaking my brush as I go down, and make sure again we go off the canvas either side. And then this is going to nicely frame our design as well. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to go ahead and go to our layers. Let's collapse this group down, because we'll come back to it. Let's then create two new layers again, and let's swipe on the two of them and group them together again. And this is going to be our middle ground. So slightly further back, and we're going to drag this underneath Cooper as well. So Cooper now is in position behind our foreground in his position, and then we've got some extra layers here to mess with for our midground. And again, open that second group, and on the bottom layer out the two, we're going to want to go ahead and draw in some more rocky formations. So let's just select any colour for the moment. Let's just select a slightly lighter grey, just so that we can see the difference between these shapes here and our formation colour that we're going to use now. And this layer here doesn't need to be very large. We just want to create some sort of pieces of rock that are just maybe arching their way upwards. So maybe something like this, and by all means go in and out of your formation that you may have already created, and something like that. And again, go all the way down to the very edge. So you start at the very edge so that you can drag and drop your colour in like so. And now I've got the second layer of rock it's slightly further back. And then we'll reflect this on the other side, but you don't have to go top to bottom sometimes. So maybe I'll start at the bottom here. I've got my pen on the canvas as we speak, and then I'm just going to draw in some rocky formation towards the top half instead. And because I went all the way to the edge, I can drag and drop on the left hand side and fill that in. Now I'm actually happy for that to just work like that, that we end up with a little bit of space here, which we can play with in a second for our very background layer of rock. So I'm going to leave that as is, that's fine with me. I'm going to go ahead and collapse this group down, and we're going to repeat that process one more time. So we're going to create 2 new layers again. We're going to swipe on the second one out the 2 and group them. And then let's just drag that group underneath the group that we were just using. So this really is our background now. And if you want to, you can tap on the group, you can rename them, and you could call this foreground. We could call this midground, like so. And then let's rename this group as well. Let's call this background. And then we've at least got some sort of terminology to reference what it is we're going to do. So in the background group here for me, I'm going to go to the bottom layer out the 2 again. I'm going to change my grey again for a slightly darker grey, again just so we can see the rock formation. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in another formation here, and I want to create like a pillar just on this left hand side that's in the water at the bottom. So because I've got this piece of rock here coming across, maybe I simply just start right up here, again right on the edge of the canvas, and create that rocky formation like so. Nice bumps and lumps in there, and then just tail it off towards the bottom, something like that, and drag and drop that colour in like so. And if you wanted to at this point, you could maybe drag that and push that slightly further out, such as that, but making sure that your canvas touches top and bottom. I'm actually going to move that a smidge more just so it hides in behind there. And now I'm going to reflect the same sort of formation almost on the other side. So again, using our monoline brush, you want to start at the very top of the canvas. Let's create something such as here, and then creating some really rocky formation. And again, you don't have to be symmetrical if you don't want to. I'm going to just tail that off right to the bottom and drag and drop my colour in like so. And now we've got the cavern that Cooper has fallen through and into the water below, which we will come to shortly afterwards. So let's go to our layers, and if we collapse this group down, we've got 3 groups and Cooper. What we need to do is add in our light beams. So we're going to create one more group. So we're going to double tap and then swipe on the 2 new layers and group them together. And if we want to give this one a name, let's tap on it and rename it and call it lighting. So this will hold the beams of light that are coming through the cavern into the cavern river that's going through. And then on one of the layers, we're simply going to go to our colors, and we're going to pick out this lovely sort of blue color here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the selection. We're going to select the rectangle option, and we're going to use the color fill. And all we're going to do is from the top all the way down, just draw in a beam roughly something like that. And then that's going to be our base for our beams. And then we're going to go ahead and start to erase part of it. So we're going to grab our eraser here. We're going to use the airbrushing, and we're going to use the soft brush. Make my brush size roughly around about 6%. And I want the center of my brush to really hit this edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press on the screen. I'm going to draw all the way down and pop my finger on the screen to get a perfectly straight line. And you'll see what that will do is that'll start to get rid of quite a bit of light, but we still get the definition of the beam. If you're not happy with that, you can always do it again and erase the slightly harsher edge, which I might do ever so slightly here. And again, just drawing a straight line down, pop my finger on the screen, and we erase that there. Now what we want to do is double our brush size, if not more, to roughly around about 14%, and just erase this right hand edge, going all the way down, and then popping your finger on the screen again. And then let's just erase again slightly more of that all the way down, pop your finger on the screen. But what I've done there is I've moved the second erasing line slightly outwards, so now we get quite a sort of defined beam really. And again, you could reduce your brush size down to 6% and get rid of this pretty firm line here, and just draw all the way down, popping your finger on the screen like so. And then the final thing that I want to do is let's increase our brush size again to about 15%. And we just want to sort of create a diagonal line just to erase the bottom half of the beam so that it gets slightly softer towards the bottom, like so. And I'm just erasing slightly upwards just to create a nice soft feathering as it makes its way down. And this is our beam of light that we're going to use multiple times and drop and drag into different places. But what we want to do is we want to grab our cursor, we want to rotate this one to start with, because all the beams are coming through this middle point. We can start to position them where we want them. So something like that's pretty good for the first one. So now we're going to go ahead and duplicate this beam multiple times and create all the beams that are making their way through the rock. So the first thing we're going to want to do is swipe it to the left and duplicate. I'm going to grab my cursor and I'm actually going to flip it horizontally and then drag it over to the right. So I'm going to really sort of create the beam and really define where it's coming through the sort of crack in the ground above. So something like that looks pretty good, just to create that sort of level of symmetry. Let's swipe that to the left now and duplicate it and create different levels of beams. So we can just drag that into position, and then maybe on this one we rotate it slightly. So let's grab the green handle at the top, creating a different beam from a different angle, something like that. That looks pretty good. And let's just continue to duplicate and create all our beams. So we're going to grab our cursor on every occasion, and then you're going to want to mess around by making some slightly skinnier than the other, and maybe even dragging them slightly up, because wherever your end of your beam ends, that's where it's going to hit the water. So I wouldn't go too high, because we just want our water to sit in this space down here. So that one maybe was a bit too high, something like that's good. And maybe let's swipe that to the left. Let's create a really wide one, so grab the freeform option, scale that out. That'll add a lot of colour, so just bear that in mind with your design. Something maybe like that, and if I straighten the line out a little bit, we can start to position that in an area where we're happy with it. And because I've got the freeform option selected, I can continue just to tinker around. Let's actually mess around and see what we can come up with. Drag that out. We want the angles to all be slightly different as well. You don't want them to be relatively, consistent. And I'm going to continue to swipe on different layers and then change them up. So we should end up with roughly around about 7 in total. I think that would look pretty good. You want some, like I said, slightly skinnier than others, but you also want to angle them in a certain way so that it looks like it really is hitting a rough piece of rock above. So duplicating the layer, and then maybe drag this one over here too. And something like that is actually come together quite well. So we've got quite a lot of the foundation sort of layers in there at the moment. We can now start to have a look about how we'll go ahead and start adding in the lighting onto the rocks. So let's do that. Let's collapse this lighting group down. Let's go to our foreground group, and in here we have our layer for the dark rock. Now, because I used white for mine, and what we're going to do is we're going to tap on that layer. We're going to go ahead and alpha lock it, and then we're going to go to our colors. We're going to double tap at black at the bottom of the disc, and then we're going to go back to that layer and fill it in. And now that's the correct color for this style. Now what we want to do is switch out to this blue again, and we're going to go to our brush library now, and we're going to find the artistic section, and we're going to use the Aurora brush for this one. Now this one is a quite interesting brush. My brush size is going to be around about 20% to start this off with. So before we start using this brush, let's go to our layers. Let's use the empty layer that we should have in the group already. Let's tap on it and use the option of clipping mask. And for demonstration purposes, let's just have a look at what this brush does. So you can see that we've got a lot of different colors in here, and it will really start to make this sort of rock area sort of sparkle. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at where the lighting's coming from, which is up here, and then everything that the light should hit, we're going to just create some big lighted areas and spread that color in like so. Now this brush is obviously pretty wild, but don't worry about it for the minute. I'll show you how we're going to go ahead and tame it down a little bit. So I'm creating all the little ledges where the lighting's going to hit. I'm also going to do some under lighting. So up here, some little lighting that may be bouncing off of the water up into this cavern. And let's do the same on the other side now. Let's just continue to look at where the lighting would come from, what it would hit. This should be very different per design that everybody's doing. And let's just continue to make our way up this ledge here, like so. And then that should be the sort of end result that we're looking for. And by all means, come in and maybe spread this colour out a little bit more, so it's slightly further back, because as I mentioned, this is going to be the foundation colour. So you can see I'm just tapping away a little bit, nice and lightly, just to bring a little bit more of the colour further back. Not too close to the edge, because we don't want it to actually touch the edge, but just bringing in a little bit more. And then we're going to go ahead and go to our layer, tap on the N, and we're going to lower the opacity down. Let's go down to roughly something about 29%, 29-30%. And what we're going to do is we're going to create one new layer again. We're going to tap on that and make sure it's a clipping mask. And let's now look at where we've added the highlights and add in the actual highlights. So what I mean by that is let's reduce our brush size down to about 15%. So what I mean by that is if I zoom in, we can start to have a look at where I've positioned our foundation lighting, and that is your limit. You don't want to go any further back than that. So I would stroke this edge down here and this little ledge there too. And I would add in a little bit here too on this ledge, and likewise here. But you don't want to go further back. This is really where all the lighting's actually hitting and bouncing around. So we're just going to go around and add in that color again. So we're just building up the highlights as always, which I like to always mention in my tutorials. And then let's go all the way up here and just stroking that edge like so. And we add in some really beautiful punchy areas like so. And let's go around the outside here too on this ledge. It's a really fun brush to use, and once you learn how to understand what it's going to add to your canvas, it's quite a fun one, and you can have a lot of fun practicing with different colours. So something like that looks pretty good. The only thing I want to now do is start to look at how much lighting we've actually added here, because I don't want this to be the main focus of the lighting. The lighting should be this sort of middle ground and slightly further back. So all I'll do is just lower the opacity down on this occasion again. Let's go down to something around about 50%. And then that way we've still got our nice highlighted areas, but we want to focus all of the attention in the middle of the design. So the lower areas of rock will be where we really punch out the colours. So now we're going to go ahead and repeat the same process of adding two layers, one your foundation colour and then your highlight colour for the midground and the background as well. So let's go to our layers, let's collapse the foreground down. Let's go ahead and look at our midground, and we should have an empty layer and our rocky formation. First of all, we're going to want to go to the rocky formation and alpha lock it. Let's go to our colours and select black. Let's go back to that layer and fill it with the black. And then we're going to go ahead and go to our empty layer. Let's tap on that and make sure it's a clipping mask. We're going to switch back to the blue that we need, which is this one here in the middle. And we're going to leave our brush size at 15% because all the details are getting further back. We want to continue to make sure we scale everything accordingly. And now we're going to go ahead and add in those highlights just the same as we did your foundation colours, of where the lights may be bouncing back up off the water or is slightly being trickled on by the beams coming down. So I'm adding in that colour here. Again, your foundation ones want to be slightly wider so that when we add in our main highlights, they've got some space to live in. So something like that is good with me, and where it's really outlining where all the rock is. And then let's have a look at the other side. Let's do the same. So the lighting coming down here, adding in a nice big space. There might not be anything under here because of where the lighting's coming from. There will be on this ledge here, and then here too as well. And finally, I have two little areas down here too, so I'm going to add in some highlight there and add in some highlight there too. So again, let's go to our layer. Let's lower the opacity down to 30%. And then let's go ahead and create a new layer. Let's tap on it and make sure it's a clipping mask. And let's reduce our brush size down to, I think we can get away with 10%. And then we're going to go ahead and add in our actual highlights now on top of our foundation colours. So let's just add in some nice beautiful highlights in these areas down here. And then under here too. And you'll be able to see this through the beams. So you can add a little bit of extra colour in there. And feel free to tap away if you want to go ahead and just trickle some back into your foundation colour. Here too, I'm going to add in some nice colour there. And what I'm trying to do with this effect is trying to give the impression that this rock is kind of like a shiny, maybe like a limestone or some sort of shiny rock in this planet that Cooper has landed in. So this rock here is quite special in some way. So I think that's quite a cool little brush to use to try and get that across. So that's looking really cool. I'm happy with how that looks. Now, because this is where a lot of the lighting is actually going to hit, because it's in the middle of the design and that's where the beams are, I'm going to leave it as is for a minute. I'm quite happy with the 100%, but if you're not, just go ahead and lower it down. Maybe you lower it to maybe 80%, but I'm quite happy with the 100 for the moment. Let's repeat the process now for the background color as well. So let's go back to our background group. The first thing we're going to want to do is go to the layer that we drew in for the final pieces of rock. Let's tap on it and alpha lock it. Let's go to our colors and switch it out to black. Let's go to that layer and tap on it and use the option of fill. Now, if you are struggling to see that, you may want to change your background color from black temporarily to something lighter. So like this light gray, for example, and now I can see where my rocky formation is, and we can always change that back afterwards. So let's go back to our layers. Let's go to this empty layer within the background group, tap on it and use the option of clipping mask and repeat the process. So we're going to go to our colors and select the blue. Now we're going to continue with our brush size at 10% because this is even further back, and then the details will go down to roughly about 5%. So again, let's add in our foundation colors of where the light would be hitting, create those nice little ledges in here, and you can hide some areas like there as well, making sure that the lighting is very much focused coming down onto the rocks. So here I can get away with, again, tapping away to spread the lighting out a bit more if you don't want to draw it in, because this brush adds quite a lot of content. And tapping away I think also adds a nice rocky look to it as well. I'm going to tap away under here just to add in some underlighting, and tap away, tapping away, and really creating those really fun looking rock designs. And let's do the same on the right hand side. So my rocks come all the way down from here, so adding in that rock. So I'm kind of like tapping away a lot more now because the brush has got quite small. When you draw, it's quite a precise little line, so I'm tapping away a little bit more and just then going back over myself to save some time. So just colouring in that edge really first and then thickening it out as we're adding in our foundation colour. So just tapping away, adding that in like so, and then tapping away all the way down here. Now this part here will actually be underwater, so this will actually look really cool if we start to add some colour on there. And then let's go ahead and lower the opacity down on this one because it's not our main focus. We can lower that down to, let's go down to the 30% mark again. Or even let's make it a bit higher. Let's go for something where it's got a bit more lighting. Let's go for something about 60%. And then let's go ahead and create a new layer. Let's tap on it and use the option of clipping mask. Now I'm going to reduce the brush size this time to roughly 7%. I don't want to go too much smaller because this brush is quite fine as it is. And then we're just going to go ahead and add in those lovely highlights in the areas we want them. Add in that colouring right on the edge of the rock really. And every time you get a nice little ledge like that, it tends to look really, really good. So just add in that colouring. Same on this side too. So we're just repeating the process really at this point because we've got 3 different levels of the rock. We have to add it in multiple times. And then just add that in like so. And then just tapping away, adding some lovely colour in there as well. And maybe for this one, we just lower the opacity down a smidge to, let's go something around about 90%. Let's be kind of bold with that. And now what we want to do as a reminder, let's collapse our background group down. Let's go down to our background color and let's double tap on it to change it to black. And now our beams don't look so much of a distraction from the rest of the design because now we can really get an idea for the colors and where everything sits. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and create the water for the area that Cooper's about to land in. So we want it to sit in front of our background, and we also want it to hide behind our foreground. So we can go ahead and create a new layer here between the midground group and our background group. I think that'll be perfect. And we're going to go to our brush library here. We're going to go to painting, and we're going to use the old brush for this one. And this will give us a nice smudge sort of look to it. So we're going to increase the brush size. I think let's go for something about 10% to start with. We want the lines right here where our beams are landing to be nice and big, and then as we get further back we can fade them out, because I don't want there to be any lighting back there at all. So what we're doing is we're just stroking from left to right, and this brush will literally do the work for you. And then as you get further back towards here, just add in maybe 1 or 2 very faint lines in the background. But down here you want to add in a lot more colour than you do back there. And then be brave at certain points when you're overlapping your colour. Just add in some brighter areas like so. And then that should all really come together like that. And now what you want to do is, based off the beams that were created, we can start to look at where we could add some nice highlights in the water where it's actually hitting straight down onto the water. So let's go ahead and change our colour to the lighter blue that I've got here. Let's go then, and on our layers, let's create a new one just above our water layer that we just created. Now we can reduce the brush size to about 6%. And looking at where the beams are, I've got a beam here and here to start with. So this area here, I can maybe start to smudge in some extra colour, and likewise just here in front of this rock, like that. Likewise, I've got a beam just there in the background, so I'm going to go ahead and start to smudge in some highlight. And then I've got 3 beams here over here on the right hand side, so one here, and another one there, and just adding in some nice punchy highlights so that we can really emphasize that the lighting is coming down from the top of the cavern onto the water and creating these highlighted areas. And now with our white layer, we want it to start to blend in a bit more to the area around it. So we're going to go to our layer and we're going to tap on it. We're going to use the option of add. Now it will start to emphasize the layers that are underneath it, which is the blue. So it'll bring in a lot more of the blue color here where the lighting's hitting, and it will start to blend the sort of 2 layers together quite nicely. And finally, I want to emphasize even more about the waves in the water here. So we're going to go to our brush library. We're going to go to drawing, and we're going to use this Marilla brush. And using the same color, we're going to create 1 new layer again. And with our brush size, let's lower it right down to about 2%. And then where that little area is there, we just highlight over the top of it, creating the top of a wave. So something like that. So just creating those sort of rough areas where the lighting and the sort of top of the little waves are starting to crash, and just bouncing the 2 together. And just over here as well, I'm going to create a nice sort of froth sort of look to the top of that. And then likewise here too, let's create one just making its way down towards the bottom. And just to add some extra detail back here ever so slightly, I'm going to create some small, very, very small ones. I might even reduce the brush size down to 1% here, and just add in some much smaller, tiny ones back there. You don't want to be too bright with it like that one though. And now looking at what we've just drawn in there, I'm going to go to my layer options, and I'm going to scroll down until I find the option of hard light, which should let in a little bit more of the blue. And now all I want to do is go back to the original wave layer that we had here. Let's go to our brush library and our soft airbrush. And all I want to do is, with our brush size set to about 5%, very lightly, just want to paint in some more blue, very lightly in here. So it's the lighter blue out the 2. Just to fill out the water area a bit more. Now what this will do is it will start to make it look like it's less like a floor and more like water, because we're going to start to fade out these 2 pieces of rock on either side. And what we could do is we could actually smudge these edges out so that it looks like it really is underwater and disperse those lines slightly. So we could go to our layers. If we could go down to our background group, and this is only obviously in my design, it might be the same for yours, but anything that sits under the water, you want to kind of blend it out a little bit because it wouldn't be so defined through it. So we're going to go to the bottom layer. I'm going to tap on it and turn off its alpha lock. And then I'm going to grab my smudge tool, and using the same old brush that we used for the waves, if we zoom in, we can just start to disperse that shape a little bit. It's obvious that it's still there, but it's quite small in terms of it's still got a little bit of shape, but it's being faded out by the water underneath it. And then we'll end up with our watered area where Cooper's about to fall into, which nicely fades out into the background into the distance where we can't see in the rest of the cavern. So now we've got our sort of background scene all together, we can start to go ahead and highlight Cooper and make sure he's in the correct colours. So first of all, we used white, so let's just tap on Cooper and use the option of invert, and that will flip his colours from white to black. And then we're going to create a new layer and tap on it and use the option of clipping mask. If you're running out of layers at this point, you could go back in and looking at your light beams, you could potentially merge them all into one layer, because we are now done with those. Likewise, you could go back into your foreground groups, for example, and pinch those down and make just one layer. I'm okay for the minute, but if you're struggling for layers, that should be something you should consider. But as for the background, we're done with it as it is, so we can go ahead and take a look at Cooper now. So on this clipped layer to Cooper, I'm going to simply just change it out to the blue that we've got here, which matches our beams. And then I'm going to go to my brush library, and under airbrushing, I'm going to use the soft brush. And I'm going to make the brush size about 3%, I think. Let's actually go smaller than that. Let's go down to 2. Now, if you want to see your brush so you can know where you're about to draw on the canvas, you can go to Preferences under Actions and turn on the brush cursor. That way you'll get this circle around your pen tip, so that you can see what you're about to highlight. Now all the lighting you can actually see because of the beams, so we're going to just highlight the top edge of Cooper. So as always, start off nice and lightly, add in your foundation colours first. So on the top of his leg here, there should be a nice little bit of light, but light always bounces around, and because we've got the waves underneath in the water, there'll be an underglow as well, so we can add that underglow in at the same time. So essentially the whole part of Cooper, we're adding a top highlighted area, and we're adding an under highlight as well. And then let's do the tip of his foot here, coming down slightly like so, and then his other leg, the top of the leg here. And then you could have a look at where the design goes and just add in a little bit of a highlight down the leg a little bit more, just to emphasize his body position. And we're just being very light here, pressing very lightly. And then on the chest as well, you could go ahead and add in a lovely highlight in there as well. The tops of the gloves, and likewise this hand as well. So I'm adding in sort of what I would call my foundation colours at this point. Just adding in where the sort of lighting would hit, and then you go in afterwards and you emphasise where the lighting really is, you know, very punchy. And then we've got a lot of lighting coming from the top there. His helmet is made of a material that's more reflective, so we can go ahead and in the visor part, we can start to add a lot more highlight like so. And then just around the top of the helmet. And then as always, we need to create that underglow, so we come down here and then around the bottom of the backpack. Start off nice and lightly, as always, just add that colour in. And then let's just emphasize his back a little bit, where it's just separated from the backpack a little bit more. So looking at that, we've got a lovely little start to our highlights. Let's go in, and with the brush size even smaller, about 1%, let's emphasize those edges where the lighting really is starting to hit. So the top of his foot here, the top of his shin is going to be really bright. And then the same on the thigh here. Let's have a look at this foot, so the tip of the foot, down the edge here. Across the shin here as well. And then let's go down his leg a little bit more. A little bit under here. His chest is going to be nicely hit by that lighting from above. So let's just add in a lovely highlight there too. Now the hands are also going to be tipped quite heavily in the lighting. So let's just have a look at those. Likewise, his other hand obviously as well. So let's just make sure we tip the glove in quite a lot of lighting. And then the underside of his arm here would have a little bit of reflection. His visor, again, I want to make sure I go back in here and add in a lot of colour, because his visor is made of a material that's slightly punchier and reflective. And then let's just make sure we add in some extra highlights like so. And when you're at this stage now, adding in the really punchy ones is the really rewarding stage, because you're adding in the bits that really define your character's position and how they are impacting the environment that they are in. I'm just adding a light highlight here just around the shadow of the shoulder, just to emphasize that body position a bit more. Let's then take a look at the top of the backpack maybe that we didn't highlight before. Just add in a little bit there. And then the under highlight, I'm just going to skim the bottom of the backpack here and then around the back of the leg as well. So then zooming out, Cooper has had a lot more highlighted areas added. So looking at this now, the only thing I would change is I want to add a lot more lighting, but again, a nice softer version. So I'm actually going to make sure I keep it nice and soft by reducing the brush size down to 50% and just emphasizing here on the stomach a lot more that the highlighted area is, facing upwards. Likewise, the top of the shin maybe, and then just adding in even more highlights where necessary, just to emphasize where all that lighting is coming from, because lighting is very key in making your subject look and feel part of the design. So again, I'm emphasizing that sort of armpit here because of the lighting coming down. The helmet, once again, could do with some nice lighting. I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight down here, down the back of the backpack. Now zooming out from Cooper, we can see he's nice and highlighted and very sharp in the center of the design. Now the only thing I'm going to adjust at this point is my beams of light are very defined still, and this is totally dependent on whether or not you made your beams quite defined like I have. I want to just fade them out ever so slightly, just so that the focus is still on Cooper so much rather than the background. So we're going to go to our lighting. I've got all my beams of light here. I'm going to pinch all of them together into one layer. So now we're going to go to adjustments and we're going to go to motion blur and layer. And now because this lighting effect that we've got here, it's quite sharp, but when you would see lighting like this, it would be really soft. So we want to go diagonally from like bottom left inwards of the design, and we're really starting to soften those lines out a lot more. And I've got a motion blur there of roughly around about 40% in a diagonal fashion. And by all means, experiment with your lines. You may go slightly more horizontal here. You will start to lose a bit of the dark lines making their way through, but that's kind of what we want to do. So I've gone and created a glow. Let's try and find an area that I like. I've actually increased the glow as well to 45%, and then going a bit more horizontal, I think I end up with the effect that I want. So 44% roughly there, and we've really softened those lines out. And now Cooper is in full focus in the center here, and our beams of light are simply there just to decorate him as he's falling into the water. And if I pop my pen on top of the canvas and I go full screen with 4 fingers, we end up with today's finished design. So make sure to go ahead and check the link in the description so you can download page 4 of the comic, where you can drag and drop your design into the comic so you can follow along with the comic but add your designs as we go. I'm really excited for this series, so please drop some feedback in the comments down below. I would look forward to hearing it, and as always, be sure to like the video and subscribe for weekly content. This Cooper series is going to be really fun and we're going to take him on a journey, so be sure to subscribe so you can follow along and see where we take it. As always, be sure to share your designs with me on Instagram and TikTok. The links are both in the description down below so you can tag me in your designs. As always, a massive shout out to my patrons. I'll throw their names up on the screen now, where if you'd like to get some exclusive tutorials and have your say on where Cooper ends up or what his journey will look like, head on over to Patreon and show your support over there. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.